Tonight, a scathing new report from the Inspector General's office is raising concerns over how the mayor's office is choosing to spend tax dollars.
Tents, blankets, and backpacks. A snapshot of the many struggling with hunger and housing across the 52,000 of that spent at Ravens and Orioles games inside the mayoral suite.
We are back once again talking about Baltimore and Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott. The same mayor who has been telling residents they need to tighten their belts while his administration tries to close budget gaps with new fees and fines. But now his own office has been hit with a report from the Inspector General, and the receipts are right here. And what those receipts show is almost unbelievable. Stadium receipts, crab cake receipts, flower arrangement receipts, even a farewell party receipt for someone who never actually left the job.
The investigation finds hundreds of purchases missing prior approval. Much of it's been on food, flowers, and luxury stadium suites.
This new report puts spending within the mayor's office under a microscope. Investigators now sounding the alarm on more than $100,000 worth of unapproved purchases and what they call a severe lack of oversight.
Inside the wallets of more than 200 government employees. City-issued purchase cards, commonly referred to as P cards. Think of them as company credit cards using taxpayer dollars. Tasked with watching over the hundreds of cardholders making thousands of transactions, just one city auditor, triggering the city's watchdog to step in.
We've talked before about Brandon Scott and his favorite SUV on this channel, and the pattern has always looked the same. Money gets spent first, then the explanation comes later. And whenever someone tries to ask questions or hold the office accountable, the response quickly turns into deflection. But this time things went a little differently. The Inspector General stepped in and started pulling back the curtain on what is really happening inside the mayor's $24 million office budget. So today we're going to walk through the report, look at where the money actually went, and ask a simple question. Is Mayor Brandon Scott using taxpayer money the way it is supposed to be used? And interestingly, this entire investigation didn't begin with some major federal probe. It actually started with a single anonymous phone call to a city hotline. And when investigators began digging into the records, what they discovered was shocking.
One person can't be responsible for tens of thousands of transactions because they're 8 months behind already. We need to have more compliance and oversight in order to protect the taxpayers' money. And this report outlines that clearly.
An anonymous hotline complaint leading Inspector General Isabel Cummings' office to look into P-card spending within the mayor's office specifically. Their investigation finding over roughly the last 3 years, 4 P-cards collectively making nearly 2,000 purchases, totaling more than $1 million. Of which $167,000 spent without proper approval from the city's Bureau of Procurement.
At first, it almost sounds too unbelievable to be true. But according to the report, around 200 government employees were issued city credit cards, all funded by taxpayer dollars. Thousands of transactions were being processed through those cards. And the oversight system responsible for monitoring all of that spending was essentially one single auditor who was already 8 months behind on reviews before that hotline call was ever made. In other words, there was virtually no real oversight happening at all. The system existed mostly on paper. It was like putting a sign on the wall that says, "Please behave," but having no one actually checking whether anyone follows the rules. And when oversight disappears, the people who ultimately suffer are the taxpayers. Baltimore residents who are paying their taxes while some of them are literally living in tents outside City Hall. Residents who are being told they must accept new fees to help balance the city's budget. Meanwhile, inside the mayor's office, government credit cards were being used with almost no accountability. According to the report, about $167,000 was spent without approval, without waivers, and without proper sign-offs. Just swipe after swipe. But the amount alone isn't the most surprising part. What really stands out is what the money was actually spent on. Because once you see where those dollars went, you start to understand why nobody wanted too many questions being asked. And before we go further, a quick reminder, if you're watching and you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. More than 80% of the people watching right now aren't subscribed. If you enjoy these kinds of investigative breakdowns, hit like and subscribe. Now let's continue, because the report only gets more concerning from here. The Inspector General didn't just uncover paperwork problems. They uncovered exactly what was on those receipts.
The vast majority of what waivers weren't received was actually food. It's about 295 different purchases lacked waivers that were pretty substantial amounts.
The IG finding 468 food-related transactions, totaling $230,000. Of that, $52,000 spent on food and beverages during Orioles and Ravens games inside the mayoral suite at both stadiums. In another instance, an administrator reportedly demanding a, quote, fresh fruit tray available to everyone in the mayor's suite daily. The report also flagging purchases investigators say are flat out prohibited, citing at least one transaction for Tito's Vodka during a Ravens game.
The rules of the city government should apply to everyone equally. In most agencies, people, when they have celebrations, they collect the money. They don't use the taxpayer funds because most throughout the city, most would never be approved.
Once you start pulling back the curtain, the details become very clear. Fresh fruit trays ordered daily for the mayor's stadium suite during Ravens games, all charged directly to taxpayers. In total, about $52,000 was spent at the stadium alone. And we're not talking about a few occasional work lunches. Investigators counted 468 separate food transactions, totaling roughly $230,000. The Inspector General even obtained the individual receipts from M&T Bank Stadium. Maryland crab cakes, priced at $74 each, bottles of Maker's Mark and Tito's Vodka. And before anyone jumps into the comments trying to justify those purchases, alcohol is explicitly prohibited on city purchasing cards. That's not a gray area in policy. It's a clearly written rule.
The report also flagging purchases investigators say are flat out prohibited, citing at least one transaction for Tito's Vodka during a Ravens game.
The rules of the city government should apply to everyone equally. In most agencies, people, when they have celebrations, they collect the money. They don't use the taxpayer funds because most throughout the city, most would never be approved.
The report also finding purchases the mayor's office made through the city's vendor payment platform ballooning from $380,000 in 2022 to $4.5 million in 2025.
And this is what can happen when spending power grows while oversight disappears. When entitlement meets a system where nobody is really checking the bills. These purchases weren't hidden behind complicated financial tricks. They were simply happening in plain sight. Card after card, swipe after swipe, because apparently nobody was watching closely enough. Fox 45 later reported on the Inspector General's findings from the studio, but they didn't stop there. They took the story directly to the people paying those bills, Baltimore taxpayers themselves, and their reactions tell you exactly how people in the city feel about all of this.
To speak out on Fox 45's soapbox, a silent but stark contrast already speaking volumes. Surrounding the sidewalks outside of City Hall, tents, blankets, and backpacks, a snapshot of the many struggling with hunger and housing across the city. This as a new Inspector General report.
It is wasting the money. That's what his report shows us.
That is a little bit alarming, honestly.
Provides a snapshot of how millions of taxpayer dollars are being spent inside the mayor's office.
We need to make sure that our tax dollars are being spent how we would like them to be spent.
Detailing spending over roughly the last 3 years. The IG finding a significant sum of money going towards food and catering. More than $800,000 in total. $52,000 of that spent at Ravens and Orioles games inside the mayoral suites.
That's so sad. A lot of people need over here money. Needy people is over here and they waste the money on different places.
And in many ways, that moment tells the entire story. Honestly, not much commentary is needed after seeing that, but we're going to keep digging anyway, because the contrast is impossible to ignore. Tents, blankets, and backpacks lined up on the sidewalks outside the same building where daily fruit trays were being delivered to a stadium suite. You don't need a law degree to read through the report and understand what people are seeing here. To many residents, it looks wasteful. It looks disturbing. And for a lot of taxpayers struggling in the city right now, it feels deeply disrespectful.